I want to continue the series that we've been journeying through since September, the non-essential way, an invitation into the possibility of the moment. If you've been with us along this journey, this is a series where we've been trying to ask, what about me is essential? What about me is non-essential? What about life is essential? What about life is non-essential? Who is essential? Who is non-essential? And life during a pandemic has involved a lot of sifting and sorting and churning within each of us as we sort through all of our own fears and hopes and aspirations and agendas and dreams and these big questions. But these big questions also haven't just been sort of like churning within us. They've also been sort of imposed on us externally as institutions and corporations and politics and all of the systems that we're all a part of continue to impose their own answers to these questions and their own agendas around meaning and value and life. And the reason that we have the brackets around the non-essential way, is to remind us that there's always an invitation beyond the binary dualistic thinking that comes so natural to many of us. Wisdom says that there is a path beyond essential and non-essential, or left and right, in and out, life and death, right, wrong, us, them, yes, and no. And when it comes to you and me and who you are and who we are and what any of us might believe and what actually matters, there's always more than two options. And learning to embrace reality beyond the two dualistic options that we often find ourselves faced with, and somehow including both of those options in a way that isn't false equivalence. That's the invitation. That's the possibility of the moment, that right now, this moment, there's another way. There's possibility. As Jesus says, a more loving world is at hand. As Thich Nhat Hanh says, because you are alive, because we're alive, anything is possible. Before the holidays, I think it was just right after Thanksgiving, I was talking with a friend of mine who does some really great work with another spiritual community here in West Michigan. And she was telling me that one of her dear friends and one of her former colleagues, someone that she had done some really important work with and really trusted, this friend had come to her recently and confided something that seemed in the moment really difficult to share. And she said, I hope you're facing the reality that after the pandemic, there are lots of people who won't be coming back to church. And I'm probably one of them. I hope you're facing the reality that after the pandemic, there's a lot of people who won't be coming back to church. And I'm probably one of them. And this friend of hers said it's not because she'd like lost her faith or wasn't spiritually interested in anything. In fact, it was very much the opposite of that. But the pandemic had just raised questions that she hadn't had the freedom to ask previously, like why? And what's even the point of any of this? And now that she doesn't have church every week to sort of just stay in a routine or a rhythm, or to try and answer those questions in a specific way, and now that she's not participating in that, she doesn't actually feel a loss. The only thing that she expressed to my friend was that she has this like small amount of lingering West Michigan religious guilt about, is that okay? But it doesn't feel strong enough to prevent her from continuing to move forward, which means away from the community and the practices and the traditions that she had once been a part of. So as my friend was sharing this story with me about her friend, it was really clear that to both of us that these questions were something that actually we both shared and were wondering about, and that we had already been wrestling with in our own way, that we were trying to make sense of, not only just for the communities that we were part of, but in our own actual lives. The pandemic has created an opportunity for all of us to step back and ask, my slides aren't cooperating with me here, so sorry. All right, we're just going to be stuck here for a minute. That's fine. The pandemic's created an opportunity for all of us to step back and ask a couple of really basic questions, like, why do I even need this? And what's the point of any of this? Why do I even need this? And what's the point of any of this? And yes, I'm talking about church and religion, but I think we've been asking these questions about just about everything in our lives as well. And maybe like on top of the pandemic, when it comes to church and religion, the political situation we found ourselves in the United States has also caused us to wonder, is this all causing more harm than good? Why do I even need this? What's the point of any of this? And is this causing more harm than good? Because white American Christianity, it's become evident that it is part of the toxic cocktail, or at least the vehicle for division, disunity, separation, empire, violence, greed, homophobia, tribalism, racism, economic disparity, climate change, and fundamentalism. Like, it's all part of it. Like, in so many ways, this is the fruit of some of these communities and traditions and systems that we've been a part of in the past. So it feels really natural to be asking, like, why do I want to perpetuate any of this? Like, why on earth would I want to continue to be a part of this anymore? This feels more clear to many of us than ever, that the fruit is evident. And for me, I want to name that I feel a lot of what you might be able to call compassionate excitement about these sorts of questions. Because for me, it's like, oh, what about this? And what about that? And what about that? And all sorts of possibility and imagination and innovation and ways that we could try new things or move forward in a different way or find freedom from some of the things that have trapped us or caused harm to others. But I also recognize that these questions can also bring about so much sadness, so much grief, a good amount of fear, and can deeply impact our relationships. It can be dramatically life altering, like how we interact with these questions and how we move forward from them. So while it is true that I am somebody who is asking these questions for myself, I can't offer really clear answers, but I can share a couple of things that I've been thinking about as it relates to this. So I want to take a look at a story in Mark chapter 2. So I have no idea why Zoom is not cooperating with me right now, or my slideshow is not cooperating with me right now. Fine. Google Slides are non-essential at this moment. So I'm going to read this text. So Mark chapter 2, verse 23. One Sabbath, Jesus was going through the grain fields, and as his disciples walked along, they began to pick some heads of grain. The Pharisees said to him, "Look, why are they doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath?" He answered, "Have you never read what David did when he and his companions were hungry and in need? In the days of Abiathar the high priest, he entered the house of God and ate the consecrated bread, which is lawful only for priests to eat, and he also gave some to his companions." Then Jesus said to them, "The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is the Lord even of the Sabbath." Okay, just a couple of things going on here in this story briefly. It's Shabbat, the Sabbath, Saturday, the seventh day of the week. It is the day of rest that is described in the story that we find in Genesis of God creating the heavens and the earth. And it's what is prescribed as law to be followed in the Torah, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. So for centuries, keeping the Sabbath, resting on the seventh day was an important aspect of Jewish life. But I think you could make the argument that by the time of the first century, by the time that Jesus shows up on the scene, that Sabbath keeping was actually the center of Jewish life and the entire Jewish religion. Yes, there was still a temple in Jerusalem. And yes, there were synagogues found throughout much of the ancient world at this point. But because Sabbath was a practice, something located in time, not in actual space, you didn't have to go somewhere to practice Sabbath. You could do it anywhere that you were. And it was the liturgy of the Sabbath, by the time that Jesus shows up, was centered around the table and the home. It's something that anyone, anywhere could participate in. And as Judaism spread around the world, Sabbath was something that could easily spread with it. Yes, temple, yes, synagogue, but I think Sabbath is like the defining thing for the Jewish people during this time period. It's central. It's sort of the marker of the religion. And like if aliens showed up in the first century and said, hey, who wants to go check out some other planets, but you can only take one thing with you, I think they would take Sabbath. That's how central it was to the Jewish identity. So of course, like every good religion, when something is elevated to sort of the highest of importance or becomes so central, there were many complex laws and debates around what Sabbath was and how to do it just right and how to follow all the rules and how to keep God happy. And of course, the religious leaders of the day were policing everybody's behavior and obedience to what the Sabbath looked like. And in this passage in Mark chapter 2, Jesus and his disciples are walking through the grain fields. They're hungry. They pick some grains, some heads of grain to eat. And you might say, well, isn't this stealing? Is this why the Pharisees are upset? No, because the Torah says if you are poor, if you're the poorest of the poor, you can pick from the corners of anybody's grain field, from anybody's field, so that you have something to eat. So there's a little bit of a wink here from the author that, hey, Jesus and his movement is not of means, but so they're not stealing. That's not why the Pharisees are upset. The Pharisees get all angry and pearl clutchy because picking a head of grain is considered harvesting, and harvesting is considered work, and work on Sabbath is a violation of the Sabbath law, and this is the most important thing. So they are frustrated with Jesus, and they have questions about what kind of religious movement is this if you would violate the Sabbath, something that's so central to us. And Jesus responds by quoting a story about King David, who centuries earlier who had gone into the temple on the Sabbath and ate the consecrated bread from one of the holy spaces because it was a matter of life and death for him and his companions. So a lot going on here about temple, a lot going on here about Sabbath, a lot going on here about value and preciousness and how we organize and order the laws. And how we prioritize things. But Jesus concludes sort of his rebuttal to the Pharisees with this phrase. And though this story is found both in Matthew and Luke as well, this phrase is only found in this Mark story. And Jesus says, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. Sabbath was made for you. You were not made for the Sabbath. Sabbath is a gift to you. It is not something meant to enslave you. Sabbath is about your life and flourishing, not about appeasing religious authorities or a legalistic deity. Now, I don't think we could overemphasize how radical of a teaching this is that Jesus gives, because Sabbath is the central aspect of Jewish religious life at the time. It's the primary marker of the Jewish religion itself, of religious consciousness itself at the time period. And Jesus says, you weren't made for it. It was made for you. It's like Jesus is saying, if we sort of extrapolate that and zoom out a little bit, it's like Jesus is saying, religion is not for God. Religion is for you, but only in the ways that it's helpful. Religion is not for God. Religion is for you, but only in the ways that it's helpful. For me, this is a fundamental reorienting of how we understand ourselves, religion, God. It's sort of a flipping of the spiritual economy of Jesus' time period, which was all about faithfulness to power and God and doing it a certain way to keep everything in line. You exist to make that keep working. And Jesus flips that upside down. This isn't for the system or for God. This is for you, but only in the ways that it's actually helpful. Father Richard Rohr summarizes this, I think, really well and gets to the heart of religion and the point of all of it. He says this: the perennial tradition, that is, the tradition within all traditions, points to recurring themes and truths within all of the world's religions. At their most mature level, religions cultivate in their followers a deeper union with God, with each other, and with reality, or all that is. The work of religion is to religio, religament, or reunite what our egos and survival instincts have put asunder, namely a fundamental wholeness at the heart of everything. Let me read that one more time. The perennial tradition points to recurring themes and truths within all of the world's religions. At their most mature level, religions cultivate in their followers a deeper union with God, with each other, and with reality, or all that is. The work of religion is to religio. Religio is the Latin for religion, which means to religament or reunite what our egos and survival instincts have put asunder, namely a fundamental wholeness at the heart of everything. To summarize, religion literally means to religament, to reunite, to rebind to the fundamental wholeness at the heart of everything. I think you could say that the purpose of religion in this sense is the work of putting us, our relationships, and our world back together. But when religion is about getting it right for God, or appeasing religious authorities, or perpetuating systems and organizations, or brand loyalty, or virtue signaling, of course, it's going to lead to rules and division and violence and narrow perspectives and exclusion. And I think we've gotten this all backwards. All of us in some way have been a part of these sorts of systems that have it flipped from what Jesus is trying to flip it back to. And it's caused so much damage to us and the planet. But I think the wisdom of Jesus rescues us from this. I don't think Jesus came to start a new religion. This isn't new news to anybody who's probably following this community anyway. Jesus didn't come to start a new religion or even like redeem an old one. I think we could say that Jesus came mining the depths of his tradition and magnifying what is common in all traditions, while also honoring the ache for rebinding that exists in the heart of all of us, of all people. This ache that comes from separation and disconnection and division and exclusion. And I think that ache and that reality is more urgent right now than ever. Friends, we have all experienced indescribable disruption in this past season. Some of us much more than others, some of us from very different social locations than others. But if we were able to sit in a circle and share some of these things, I think it wouldn't be long before we were without words. But I think we've also been provided an unimaginable opportunity in all this, because the biggest questions about life and religion and meaning have all been thrust upon us. And these are questions that are bigger than like church, Bible, Christianity, worldview, worship, religions, or however we want to like slice it. At the end of the day, I think these questions boil down to what's the point of all of this and why? And the invitation to recognize that it's about religamenting, reuniting, and rebinding all that has been separated in our lives, in our relationships, and in our universe, which is just, in my opinion, like a fundamentally different and bigger and exciting and consequential question than like, well, the governor's trying to take away our right to worship. Like, fine, like whatever, like we can talk about that over here. But if that was the point all along, then I think like we're missing it. And also like staying there with those questions in that way has produced so many of the problems that we're now experiencing. I don't know like how many days each of us have on this earth. But I know I don't want to spend one more day in these types of conversations that, if they don't have something to do with religamenting, reuniting, rebinding all that has been separated. And I think that's the invitation. When it comes to anything in our lives right now, when we're facing so many of these questions, I think we can ruthlessly and honestly ask, does it religament? Does it reunite? Does it rebind? Does it rebind me to myself in a grounded way, in a way of depth and beauty and truth? Does it rebind us to one another beyond all of the absurd ways we have figured out how to divide ourselves? Is this path, or does this tradition, or does this religion actually provide a way for us to rebind ourselves to one another? Does it rebind us to this planet, to this world, to this beautiful universe that we inhabit? And if the answer isn't a resounding yes to those questions, then I think the way of Jesus and the urgency of our lives and the circumstances we're in invite us to move on with freedom and with clarity. Why would any of us want to spend more time or energy or resources on practices or communities or systems that actually aren't trying to rebind in the largest sense and on the largest scale? Why do I even need this? What's the point of any of this? Is this causing more harm than good? Yeah, those are the questions. And often I don't know. But for me right now, the mantra has been, religion is rebinding. And if it doesn't rebind, leave it behind. Religion is rebinding. And if it doesn't rebind, leave it behind. And I think that's the task ahead. I don't know if we have time for anything else, but this is the possibility of the moment. Thanks, everybody.